Don Kernoodle Tribute. This is a pro wrestling tribute to a fallen pro wrestler, Don Kernoodle. If you might want to watch if you're not a pro wrestling fan. To be honest, I'm not offended if you're not a pro wrestling fan and watch something else on my channel. I've got plenty of stuff, Messier, Mantra, etc. For pro wrestling fans, let's talk Don Kernoodle. Don Kernoodle was an excellent professional wrestler and had a great tag team career. When I say Don Kernoodle, many people are, if they have a clue about professional wrestling, not just modern day crap WWE, but real professional wrestling, they're going to think almost immediately perhaps of Don Kernoodle with a mask of blood on his face, coming out of the road to Greensboro. The match, Kernoodle and Steamboat and Jay Youngblood and Sergeant Slaughter, it was Don Kernoodle and Sergeant Slaughter defending the tag team titles, NWA World Tag Team titles in Greensboro, turnaway crowd. The story's been often told, against Youngblood and Steamboat, with the stipulation, I believe it was if Slaughter and Kernoodle were to lose the belts, they'd never team up again, which was pretty extreme. I'm not sure if that stipulation was also there for Steamboat and Youngblood. In any event, you would think it would make more sense, by the way, if Steamboat and Youngblood were to lose, they'd never team up again. But for whatever reason, if Kernoodle and Slaughter were to lose the belts, which, spoiler alert, they did, then they would never team again. That was a match I've seen on video. It's a great match, and Kernoodle bled buckets, and the 14,000, 500 or 15,000 people in the Greensboro Coliseum with the highway, just people trying to get into this show, that inspired the first Starrcade, which inspired, as we know, the first WrestleMania a year and a half later after Starrcade. So when people trace the lineage of WrestleMania and all the big moments and the Undertaker streak and Brock Lesnar and Shawn Michaels, Mr. WrestleMania, give a little credit to the blood and guts of men like Don Kernoodle, who paved the way. And people have no clue. They don't think like that. They don't think that a guy like Don Kernoodle, established Carolina tag team wrestler, they don't think that his blood and guts and his suffering and his sacrifice of his plasma and his blood in Greensboro Coliseum, and who knows how much money he got for that. But they don't realize that because of that inspired Starrcade 83, which a year and a half later Vince McMahon had to play, beat the Southerners, and inspire WrestleMania. People don't have the intelligence to put together things like I do, but I just did. Okay, so have some goddamn respect. What else? Talk about Don Kernoodle. He was brought in apparently back in 1973, and for one of those, open challenge things against Bob Roop, another interesting player in pro wrestling history. And apparently, Don Kernoodle submitted to Bob Roop. It was kind of the predecessor to the Cena Kurt Angle thing, 20 years later, or 30 years later, if you think about it. But how they brought Cena in to SmackDown, he lost to Kurt Angle, but he still made a good appeal for himself, or a good presentation for himself. I hate the word presentation when it comes to wrestling. But basically, Kernoodle and Bob Roop did that back in 1973, okay? Flash forward to the 1983 era Mid-Atlantic, and you've got this whole thing with Don Kernoodle and Don Kernoodle and Jim Young, Private Jim Nelson, who later became Boris Zukov, were kind of the Cobra Corps, being trained by Sergeant Slaughter. and doing quite well for themselves. They won like a regional Mid-Atlantic tag team title, apparently. But then Nelson was kind of kicked out of the team. He would go on to become Boris Zukov in a reincarnation of his persona. And Kernoodle would kind of step up to be the full-time tag team partner of Sergeant Slaughter. And they won the World Tag Team title, apparently. I just did the Wikipedia thing, and they were listing like Jay Youngblood and Pork Chop Cash and so forth. And then Jay Youngblood teamed up with Steamboat, which was a great tag team, and they feuded with Kernoodle and Slaughter. And I did think for some reason that Slaughter and Kernoodle had the tag belts at least twice, but apparently not. They had one tag team title reign, which culminated in that big Greensboro match. Now, I said the road to Greensboro. I could be confusing myself because was the road to Greensboro more like this tournament, a series of tag team tournaments that set up a tag team tournament for the NWA World Tag Team title? I'm getting myself confused. I've watched this stuff on the heat's bothering me. Now we move forth. After, interestingly enough, 1983 and 84, for some reason, good for him, Don Kernoodle was actually wrestling in both the WWF and the NWA at the same time. And so the full-on rivalry between like Jim Crockett Promotions and Vince McMahon hadn't really gone on yet. Like it was there, but it was kind of like they were still, like McMahon hadn't fully stabbed everyone in the back yet. So Kernoodle was actually wrestling like in Madison Square Garden, and he was on WWF TV. Guess what? A young Mike Messier was in attendance for Don Kernoodle beating Tony Curry in the Capitol Center. Now it would have been nice to have Kernoodle and Slaughter team up in the WWF, but for some reason they never did. Then, of course, as Vince did back then, he would start using this guy from the NWA and start segueing Kernoodle into the tag team jobber spot. Back then, it wasn't uncommon for like a good solid mid-card, guy to be teamed up with a jabroni and lose a tag team match. So they started doing that to Kernoodle. Like they put him in a tag team match with some other fuck, and they would lose to the Invaders. Let's talk about his ring work for a moment. Kernoodle was just very reminiscent in my mind of like of an Arn Anderson, of a Buzz Sawyer, just like a real solid, believable wrestler of that time frame. Okay, and that's what the fans don't appreciate or understand these days. Is the believability. Yes, it's a goddamn pro wrestling match in a ring, and so it's a little goofy. However, there's a certain way of doing business, like an Ole Anderson, where you make it seem to make some type of sense logically. And Kernoodle understood that, okay? And that's how he wrestled. He wasn't looking to just do his 5 big moves in a match. He was looking to suplex you, body slam you, have a reason and a rhyme to this stuff. That was Don Kernoodle, okay? Slaughter leaves. Now, someone on YouTube has a whole Don Kernoodle tribute page, which I suggest you find. Just put Don Kernoodle in fucking YouTube, and you can find this guy's matches. It's not rocket science. But you can see Don Kernoodle with Gary Hart in his corner beating Mark Fleming in a match. And here's the thing, if you don't mind. They're still talking about Sergeant Slaughter in this video, even though I think at that point, Slaughter was off in the WWF. So it's just kind of interesting that even going into like the early mid-80s, especially if you watch World Class Championship Wrestling, they did, in a lot of these promotions, acknowledge wrestlers that were not there at the time. Like a guy could be somewhere else doing other things, but like his legacy, so to speak, was still part of the storylines of what you were watching in that territory. Pretty interesting stuff. I find it interesting. Maybe you don't, if you're just a modern day WWE fan who lives and dies by the tit of Vince McMahon, which I don't, okay? If you're just suckling the milk from the tit of Vince McMahon Jr. for your wrestling information, I can't help you. I mean, just wait. Well, I can help you, but you need to be wanting to be helped. Then we move forth. Kernoodle and another fine gentleman, Cowboy Bob Orton, or Bob Orton Jr., or Cowboy Bob Orton Jr., Randy Orton's father, essentially. And Don Kernoodle won this tag team title tournament I want to say in early '84 when Ricky Steamboat retired, and here he is again, Don Kernoodle. Don Kernoodle also made an interesting appearance at Starrcade '83, by the way, to say hello to Ricky Steamboat and Jay Youngblood, his rivals. But Kernoodle and Cowboy Bob Orton, boy, I'd like to see more footage of them. We talk about, Arn Anderson talks about how much he adored Dick Slater and Bob Orton Jr. as a tag team, and I have an affinity for Kernoodle and actually Ivan Koloff. I'll get to that in a minute. But that's kind of a dream team of solid upper mid-card technicians, Orton and Kernoodle, managed by Gary Hart. What a dream team that is. Now, the Kernoodle and Orton team, I think, eventually lost to Wahoo McDaniel and Mark Youngblood. Unfortunately, Jay Youngblood had passed on at this point, so Mark Youngblood was trying to fill those shoes. Wahoo was basically carrying young Mark Youngblood. Then they brought in the Renegade, which was another fucking Youngblood brother. And all this is Mid-Atlantic. There's an interesting YouTube video series called 1984, A Year in Transition. If you want to know more information or relive these memories of Mid-Atlantic wrestling in 1984, when they say it's a year in transition, it's interesting. It's like kind of the end of one era, maybe the Ricky Steamboat Mid-Atlantic era, and then before we get full-on Dusty-sized in '85, baby. But Dusty's there, Boogie Woogie Man Jimmy Valiant, Flair's kind of a tweener. It's interesting stuff. Nikita Koloff's coming in. Oh, here we go. Ivan Koloff and Don Kernoodle win the NWA Tag Team title, and the whole idea of the Nikita Koloff character, I believe, was Don Kernoodle's. So everything that's associated with Nikita Koloff, okay? The Super Brawl match, Luger and Sting versus the Steiners, match of the year, 1991, Pro Wrestling Illustrated, that Nikita Koloff interferes in. If it wasn't for Don Kernoodle having an idea for a character named Nikita Koloff, Ivan's nephew, there would have been no awesome, epic Super Brawl 1 match, which changed the face of pro wrestling history and the way that matches were done. All these high spot matches that you sit there and finger bang yourself for, that you can credit to Don Kernoodle, because he invented the character of Nikita Koloff, basically saw the need for it, wanted to turn babyface, and Don Kernoodle said, hey, Ivan, can we get a guy to play your nephew? And Ivan didn't have an idea, so they called Road Warrior Animal and said, hey, do you have a guy? I said, hey, my buddy Steve Simpson might be available. So let's give some fucking credit and respect on Don Kernoodle's name. Kernoodle turns babyface, and ironically enough, if you want to see some real emotion in a goddamn wrestling match, because I think you modern day fuck fans, if you're watching this, you don't understand, watch Ricky Steamboat and Don Kernoodle in a flag match against the Russians, Ivan and Nikita Koloff, okay? It's about a 15-minute match, maybe 17 minutes. It's an epic match, and it's Don Kernoodle at his babyface finest. Don Kernoodle like an Eric Embry in world-class wrestling. Yeah, I'm digging up some fucking ghosts from the wrestling past right now, folks. All right? You talk about Don Kernoodle turning babyface. You talk about Eric Embry turning babyface. 1990 or 91, whatever, world-class USWA. You're talking about organic love for these kind of middle-earth, middle-ground guys that connect with the fans on a level that a Vince McMahon and his hack team of writers couldn't come up with in a million years. That's Don Kernoodle, okay? You understand me? Now, around this time, when Don Kernoodle's turning babyface, he's got this younger brother who I believe, I could be wrong, wrestled as Keith Larson at times, or Rocky Kernoodle, or Keith Larson. And to be honest, no offense to him, because he's going through mourning for his brother, but that career never really took off. And sometimes I think, like, at the opening couple of Starrcades, like Starrcade 85 or 86, you'd see these random Kernoodle brothers tag team matches, but no offense, I wasn't really into Rocky Kernoodle, no offense. And Don, they always said that he had these neck injuries, and then it was kind of implied that the neck injuries were because of the Russian sickle from Nikita. And I don't know if that was storyline shtick or kind of a combination of reality and storyline. I really don't know. So I'll leave that up to your imagination, wrestling fans. So Don Kernoodle was one of those guys who really peaked around 83, 84. It's kind of sad that, you know, like another guy like a Rocky Soulman Johnson, just the moons were not aligned for these guys to have like a high-profile pay-per-view match or a high-profile WrestleMania match or a high-profile Starrcade match. Like, it just seems that Don Kernoodle peaked like just a little too soon. Kind of like Magnificent Morocco, you know what I mean? Like, there's just certain guys who, they were there for that first kind of wrestling boom of the mid-'80s, or that particular boom, but it's like they just peaked literally like months too early. And some of those wrestlers I really like a lot. You know, Tommy Rich was a great wrestler of that, you know, ooh, just missed it. Just wasn't quite there. Meaning that their careers peaked. A great Kabuki. Imagine if the great Kabuki wrestled at WrestleMania 2. You know what I mean? Just certain things, certain guys, because of the timing, just were not at the right place at the right time, it seems. For them to like be like some guy you talk about for all the time. I'll be honest, I'm doing this video under a little duress. The heat's bothering me. I don't know if I paid full attention to Don Kernoodle and giving you every nuance and detail of his career. I essentially remember him as an excellent tag team wrestler. At the time, I'm not sure how much this guy weighed or what his height was, but he looks like he was more like 225, 245 at the most. But it looked like he was about 5'10", so he wasn't like the biggest, strongest guy in the world, but he could wrestle his fucking ass off. And I wonder if today's wrestling fan who claims they like real, you know, they like fucking Pete Dunne, okay? Like they circle jerk about Pete Dunne. Put Pete Dunne against Don Kernoodle, and you tell me who's a better wrestler. I'll tell you, Don fucking Kernoodle, okay? Now we're going to have all these tributes and all these wonderful things about New Jack, which is fine. I've done my tributes to New Jack, but I'm also doing my tribute to Don Kernoodle, and I want to see other people do it as well. Not just a passing, oh, he teamed with Sergeant Slaughter bullshit. I want some real goddamn recognition for Don Kernoodle, okay? So all the wrestling podcast fucks, do your research. Instead of watching shitty goddamn Raw all the time and talking about Alexa Bliss's ass, why don't you watch some real fucking wrestling and have some real fucking opinions about it? Okay? So that's my take on it. Don Kernoodle.